Happy Thursday and welcome back to the Wolff Den. Today's episode is presented by Love Seats. 5 seats, move seats, share the love. It allows ticket holders who want to leave early, who haven't shown up to sell their seat to someone who's looking for a better seat. So check out loveseats.com for more information. Today, I am excited to welcome Rob Cressy to the Wolff Den. How's it feel to be in the Wolff Den?
Matt, I am so excited to be jamming with you.
Yeah, it's going to be a great episode here. But for the people who, they're all great, but this will be as great as all of them. For the people in the audience who don't know who you are, let us know. Give us a quick introduction, and let's get into it.
So I'm Rob Cressy, and I'm a coach, and I specialize in two things. Number one, helping people launch podcasts, and number two, personal growth in mindset, helping people become the best version of themselves by creating the habits, routines, mindsets, and ways of being so that they can do more of what they love.
So I want to get right into the podcast because we're on, I don't know if I would call this a podcast, but it will be a podcast eventually. Someone told me, have you heard the number of podcasts that 3 episodes or under is like 10, like 90%. So you're already in the top percentile if you're past 3 episodes. Have you heard anything like that?
100%. And it's exactly why when I help people launch podcasts that we launch with 4 episodes, 0, 1, 2, and 3, because by design, you're already better than all the people who have already given up.
Yeah. And that makes sense. The hardest part about doing a podcast is just doing a podcast. It's like the hardest part about almost all this stuff is like we have so many good ideas and we don't do it. And I was just talking to someone who said they want to do some content in the show, and I said just do it. Just put it out there. It doesn't even have to be a podcast. You could do YouTube, put some content out there. And the great thing about it is, at least what I use here for StreamYard, is it archives so beautifully that someone could just go and see all this stuff. Don't worry about how many people are listening to it right from the start, right? Don't worry about, if you go, this is our 213th episode. If you go back to my first 50 episodes, I'd be like, this is a disaster.
Yeah. So Matt, there's a quote that I love. Uncertainty leads to inaction. So if you don't know what to do next, you're probably not going to take action. But here's the thing. I don't expect you to know how to launch a podcast if you've never launched a podcast. So you've got a few options. Number one, teach yourself. That's what I had to do. I had no idea what I was doing. So I spent hours watching YouTube videos. How in the world do you podcast? And this is 8+ years ago. Or number two, you can work with somebody who's already done it, that has the roadmap that can accelerate the speed in which you launch your podcast. That's why I exist, where it's like, hey, I've published 1,000 episodes and people will hire me to host their shows. If you want to launch a podcast, I can help you do it faster with higher quality so you have more confidence. Boom. So which one of those 2 options do you want? And if you say, well, I don't know, well, then you're in the third bucket of the people who do nothing. Because, Matt, the number of people who say, oh, Matt and Rob, I've thought about this idea of launching a podcast for so long. How long? Oh, like a year or 2. I'm like, I'm out. Because Matt and I live in action. And that's the key to all of this is you have to get past the, I don't know what I'm doing for the first 20 episodes, because that's how you get to episode 213.
Yeah. And I had so many ideas in my life that I didn't take action on, that I look back, and those are probably my biggest regrets of things I had thoughts of doing, but professionally, really, but also sometimes personally. And it's just the hardest thing is always just start. The Nike "Just Do It" is so. It might be my favorite and the best tagline in the history of taglines. Just do it, because. But and then once you do it, like I stopped. So I did things that I started, and the second I hit that first roadblock, I was like, F it. It's going to be too hard. So get past that first roadblock, and then I'm not going to say it's smooth sailing from there, but everything else you can figure out.
Yeah, it's why I'm a big fan and I coach on micro action or micro mindset, because 1 is always greater than 0. So on the fitness side of things, I think many of us can relate to the days in which you don't want to go to the gym, or you don't want to go for a run, or you don't want to do that lifting session. So what do? I lay my clothes out the night ahead of time. Why? I did the 1 action, because that way when I wake up in the morning and I see my clothes are sitting there, it's like, Well, I can't not go now. I already committed to doing this thing right here. And the same is true for launching a podcast or creating content or anything. It's just, all right, what's the first thing that I can do? And then what's the next one? And Matt, you said something that I actually just got off a call with a prospective client. And he said the exact words that you just said others say. It's going to be too hard. And I said to him, I would like you to throw that language into the trash immediately. He's like, why? I was like, because you're just choosing to say it's going to be too hard. I'm going to tell you it's going to be easy. Both of those are just a choice of the perspective of how it's going to be. So imagine if this thing that you've never done before, you're like, yeah, I've never done this, but Matt and Rob are doing it, so it's got to be easy, right? If these two guys can do it. And I'm like, yeah, if we can do it, you can certainly do it. It's going to be easy.
These quotes get thrown around. I believe that Tom Hanks was the one who said if it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
Of course.
And so, but it's interesting too, because podcasting and starting a podcast or doing a podcast technically is easy. And it feels like everyone and their mother is doing it. Are there too many podcasts out there? I guess that's it. I would say no, because everyone has value in a podcast, but are there too many people doing it that maybe aren't doing it for the right reasons, or not really? Maybe their content might be better with a different format.
So it's probably one of the number one questions that I get for people who have these self-limiting beliefs or fears of why I should or should not launch a podcast. And it's like, I remember when I was the MC of a marketing conference in New York and we're doing Q&A, and this woman stands up and is like, why would anybody care about what I have to say? There's already tons of podcasts out there. And the answer is it's misplaced focus, because what others are doing is irrelevant to you. Do you have a podcast or not? It's a 1 or a 0. But the real answer is, if you have something inside of you that can help even one person, then it is your duty to share it with the world. So my answer to you is no, there is not too many podcasts out there. There is actually not enough podcasts out there, because everybody has the ability to help someone. And if you create a value-driven podcast that can help even one person, and Matt, you and I both know, don't care about the downloads, care about the value that you can deliver for others. That's why your show exists. Boom, when you come from that place, man, let your voice shine. It's why you and I exist, Matt, because we have something inside of us. We have wealth of knowledge and experience and passion on the things that we do. And we decided to say, you know what? We're going to share it with the world. And I'm so glad that I did, because it led me to talking to you.
Yeah, I tell my mom, like my mom always talking about wanting to write a book. And I'm like, well, who wants to read your book? And I asked that to say, to have her think about that, but also to think like, what would I put in that would make people want to read about my book? My mom is currently has a blood cancer, right? A lot of people with cancer out there writing books about their cancer journey. But I think it's true. There's might be something in her journey that other people are going to empathize with. I think there's no one in this world. I don't say no one. 0.00001% of people in this world are so unique that they can't find someone else who looks like them, has experienced something that they haven't, right? So there's always someone out there who can relate to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, is you can become that voice. And I actually especially love podcasting for industries where podcasts don't exist. Why? Because you're now the voice. It's like, why would anybody in lumber or crypto or picking up shovels ever care about what I have to do? And it's like, because there's an audience out there that is being underrepresented. There's like not a voice there. And even if there are voices, there's room for plenty of voices, and especially your voice there. And another way to think about this is you can create internal podcasts just for companies that builds their culture and communication within there. Because at the end of the day, a podcast is a platform for growth, for value, for inspiring, educating, and entertaining others. And when you come from that point, there is like infinite number of possibilities there. All you've got to do is be willing to be in the game. And most people sit on the sidelines and are never in the game to actually receive the benefits of having a podcast.
I think, yeah, I mean, if you're a business and and you don't think you could have a podcast that would interest people, then how is your business interesting people and selling products and services. That to me is just pretty obvious right there.
Whoa. And I would actually do it on the I'm Ron Burgundy of the like, if there's nothing interesting about your business, this is the thing that can make your business interesting. So what I always like to say is this can become your brand heartbeat because so many brands, interesting or boring, whatever you do, they want to hear something from someone because you can hear my voice. You can feel the emotion inside of it. You can feel my excitement for being on a conversation with you, Matt. So the same can be true for anybody's brand who says, you know what? We're going to give our audience an opportunity to connect with who we are because so much of what we're seeing right now in branding and in marketing is we're evolving past just the product because we have as many possibilities as possible for where we get our products and services and who we buy from. So now who the person or the company is just as, if not more important than what the product is because you can buy anything off of Amazon or you can go anywhere and find a service provider. But how many brands are out there that can actually communicate with their audience and relate to them on a level where they can tune in and be like, man, I get value from Matt's Ticket Time Machine. Boom. That's what I love about this.
Yeah, I think so. I want to talk about, I want to start a podcast. Where do I go from here? And I don't know if people know this or not, but I started this because everyone told me to go on LinkedIn Live. And in order to go on LinkedIn Live, you actually need to go through a platform. And my friend had a show where he was, I guess, sort of a podcast, I guess. It was Free Agent Fridays and a platform where he bring people on and talk to them. And I'm like, well, nobody wants to listen to me talk for a minute or 2 minutes every day or every other day about whatever. I said, why don't I just bring people on and talk to them and give value to the guests? It's all about the guest. There's no topic relevant, there's no, they say, what's the Wolff Den about? It's about the guest and who they are and what they're doing. That's probably, you don't necessarily recommend someone to do that, right? You'd say, do a topic, do a thing. Because in a show like this, now my feeling is I could be as good as any other one out there, whether it's Joe Rogan or Howard Stern, if I had the production value and the person to be able to get the type of guests that they get. I truly believe that. But when you're starting a podcast, I think it is good to have a target audience, correct or no?
Yeah, there's specificity because it allows you to deliver value to a specific audience because someone's not going to listen to this and being like, well, I'm not sure if Matt's going to be talking about yoga or gardening today. So you've at least shrunk the world a little bit more. So for example, my podcast is called Best Year Ever, and it's a personal growth and development podcast to help people create their best year ever. So that is both broad, best year ever, as well as specific. Boom. You're going to get inspired. You're going to learn some things that are going to help you grow on there. So now it allows me to, one, create a lot easier because I'm like, all right, what are the things that I know and I coach that can help people with habits, routines, mindsets, ways of being? And then they come to me and they know what to expect from Rob because they're like, oh, Rob's an expert in this space. He's going to be talking about X, Y, and Z. But I want to make sure that I answer your question. You said, I want to start a podcast. Where do I want to go from here? And there's 2 words that I want people to think about. Number 1, commitment, and number 2, consistency. So the first thing that I ask anybody who talks to me about wanting to launch a podcast, I say, are you interested or are you committed? Because the people who are interested, they just think about it. The people who are committed, boom, they're all in. And I know this because 8+ years ago, someone said a quote to me. They said, Rob, if you ever hope to get paid to do what you love, you better be doing it already. I wanted to get paid to talk about sports for a living. So I'm like, all right, how do you do that? And I was like, well, I should probably be talking about sports every single day. Well, how do you do that? Well, you should launch a podcast. You should probably learn how to be a host. You should probably learn audio and video editing. So for me, my commitment level was 100 out of 100 because I saw my dreams on the other side of launching a podcast. Because as soon as I stepped up to this microphone and started to talk about sports for a living, now I was somebody who talked about sports every single day, which meant that I was one step closer to someone paying me to talking about sports for a living. So I know what 100 out of 100 commitment looks like. And whether it's talking about sports or ticketing or business or personal growth and development, when you launch a podcast or you want to, this is the arena of the type of people you are a peer with. So if your commitment level is not coming in on, I'm going to use this to create the life that I want and help other people at the same time, the reason people don't do this is because they're not committed. I've thought about it. They're not strong on their why. And then number two, I talked about consistency. And there's a great book about this called The Power of Consistency by Weldon Long. And what he oftentimes says is most people just don't spend enough time going over their dreams. They might think about what they want to do once a year when they're doing their yearly goals. But imagine the person every single day that reads and visualizes their dreams and their goals day after day after day after day. We talk about this from manifestation to visualization. Well, the same can be true for podcasting. The more consistent you are, the better the chances of you creating the results, the relationships, luck finding you, where you're like, oh, doing this over and over and over again, which goes back to the commitment. When you're committed, you're more consistent because you understand the process. So what's important is finding someone or yourself to understand how to create the process to rinse and repeat this consistently.
You know what the podcast with the most listened to podcasts are in the world?
I would think that many of them now are podcasts from media companies and publishers. So if you go on like the iTunes new and noteworthy or the top whatever, you look on there and most of them are owned by some sort of media company.
Yeah, I was looking. So Rogan has the number one. He's the number one. But then you have the Daily from the New York Times. So that's what people are listening to, right? They're trying to find, the media, which is giving them, it's relevant stuff, and people want something to listen to that's consistent, that they know. I don't anticipate everyone who likes the Wolff Den to want to listen to every episode because it's about. I mean, it's going to be relevant who's on there. I think they're all interesting, but it is also relevant to who's the guest. Like some people don't care about podcasts. They're not going to think too much about this episode. Although I would argue that there will be good things to take out of this episode that are outside of podcasts, right? Because there's a lot of the stuff that we talk about with putting together a podcast. It's not that much different than all the other stuff. It's similar to what you talked about.
Yeah, this is all around two things, creation and mindset. So insert whatever, YouTube channel, write a book, speak from stage, write a blog post, meet new people, create a course or a coaching program, you name it. Whatever it is, this is about creation. And for me, I'm an expert in self-creation. I'm actually a master at this. The ability for us to say, I want to create something, and then I'm going to go ahead and make it happen. And you're just creating this process for yourself that says, oh, I've got an idea. All right, what is the next step for me to take action to make this happen? Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. That's how we as entrepreneurs and business owners, that's how we create everything, because our life is literally a series of starting at zero and doing something we've never done before. And that's what we signed up for, is that sort of process. And then number two is mindset. So when I think about these things, I'm a master at language. So I listen to all the words that everybody says, and especially you. So Matt, first thing we talked about was it's going to be too hard. And then number two thing you said was no one wants to listen to me. These are all self-talk voices that we all have, myself included. At some point when we haven't done something, or even when we have done something, an imposter syndrome sneaks in here. And it just says, all right, what's that self-limiting voice that's like, you know what, guys? You're comfortable. Don't do that thing that you don't know what you're going to do. It's going to be scary. But guess what? Nothing great ever came from your comfort zone. So by design, you want to be somebody who has no become a trigger for yes. You're like, oh, no one wants to listen to me. Oh, yeah, I see that. But you know what? I'm going to try this anyways, because I get that somebody probably will, because Matt and Rob said someone wants to listen to me because I can help someone. It will happen.
Yeah, I say I don't really care who. I mean, I say I don't care. It doesn't matter to me as much who's watching and how many people are watching. I'd love it to be blow up, and I think eventually, when I get it the way I want it to, it will. It's not why I started this. But again, there's value to having these conversations with one person watching it, as you said. But people want metrics. They want to be like the top, and you can get paid, right? The more views you get on YouTube, and maybe you can actually get a paid sponsor to sponsor your. I always found that weird, the radio and the middle of the conversation podcast, and they're just like, yeah, go, Jiffy Jaffe.
Right. Lisa mattresses. Do you need a new mattress today?
And he's obviously reading it. Even the ESPN, like the radio stuff.
Of course, it's
terrible.
It makes me cringe inside as a creator, and maybe this is because I'm too romantic about it. But I really value my audience's attention. That if I'm going to be promoting something, I want it to be something that I use or I support, or the person who is behind it. I was like, you know what? I want to help them out, or I'm going to deliver value to others. And here's something, Matt, that's part of my creator mindset that's fundamental to the way that I coach, and certainly in podcasting. There is a silent majority and a vocal minority. So by design, people are watching this on LinkedIn or some other platforms, or they're listening right now. By design, most people listening to this are never going to hit like or share or comment. But that's okay, because they could be raving fans and love what we do. And that is okay. And there'll be a vocal minority who steps up. And I think about a Facebook post I did yesterday around what is the story you are not willing to tell yourself. And for me, it was sort of, and I'll paraphrase, the story I wasn't willing to tell myself is that I would regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't give it a shot in making my dreams happen. And that's when I left my ad sales job to go all in at being a creator and an entrepreneur, and how I got to where you are right now. And on Facebook, it received, let's call it 5 likes in the first 12 hours. So most people would be like, no one gives a crap about this thing. Except one of the comments was from a woman who said, Rob, thank you so much. You don't know how much I needed to hear this today. I was like, boom, this is perfect. Because when you create a piece of content, you're creating it for one person, just to help one person, because we oftentimes underestimate or undervalue the impact that we can have on one person in the name of vanity metrics. Oh, I want to be like one of those LinkedIn posts with 10K plus likes and shares and comments and blah, blah, blah. Nah, man, I just want to help one person, because that's why we do this.
Yeah, I want all of it, but I'm happy to start with the one person, and I agree with that. I wanted this thing where I could do a virtual job fair, and I started posting, hey, does anyone want to join this virtual job fair? It's free. As a company, you can come and invite, and then you can, if you're looking for work. And I got like 3 likes and 2 comments. I mean, it's just that's really disappointing. Like, why does that get 3 likes and 2 comments where I could do good and help people, and then someone posts a meme that isn't even their own, that's been posted a million times, and there's 4,000 likes. There's just there's no rhyme or reason for any of this stuff. I know the algorithm, but so I think post content that's genuine for you, and look, maybe you won't win as much as the person who's gaming the system and getting all these likes. But those are not, you might get a like. Most people like it for selfish reasons, right? And comment for selfish reasons. So I think if you do stuff the right way, and you're who you are and authentic and genuine about all of your content, no matter what platform it is, and even just in general in person, then you'll achieve what you want to achieve with the right people, the right audience, which is more important than just getting out there to the masses. Because even if you go, 1,000 likes, whatever it is, you're not going to be Joe Rogan tomorrow.
100%. And I completely agree with you. And by design, when you are people like us, Matt, and you create content that helps people, that is very contrarian to the way that the world and the media operates. They operate based on fear, negativity, self-limiting beliefs, sensationalism, comparison, the things that are very shiny. Oh, look at this. Here's me in a nice fancy car or on vacation or doing whatever. But the reality of the situation is, by us coming from a place of wanting to help people. I know my long term mindset says I'm going to win because of where I'm coming from. And LinkedIn polls is the simplest example of this. It's like, oh, what is your favorite fruit? Apple, banana, or orange? And there's like 160,000 comments on this. And I'm like, that's dumb. I would much rather do the post like you said, Matt. Hey, I've got this thing, can help people. And you know what? That's okay if everybody doesn't connect with it, because I'm going to show up the next day and Matt's like, here's my podcast number 214. And then Rob shows up and he's like, here's my 3-minute LinkedIn live. And we're just going to keep chipping away, help, help, help. And then someone comments, is like, oh man, thanks so much. This really resonated with me. And you're like, boom, it's all worth it. I don't think the person who posts the what's your favorite fruit poll is going to sit there at the end of their life and be like, man, it was so worth it that I did that. But you and I, man, when we give and help others, we know where we're coming from. And that's all that really matters.
I have some of those other posts too, but it's all intentional for, it's what I'm doing. I like to share what I'm
Right.
doing, and what
Of
I'm doing
course.
generally today is related to my business. The king of content, I think most people, if you ask, would say it's Gary V. I'm not a fan of his. I think it's people who've seen me post know that. I've invited him to come on the show. I've had email exchange with him where I just don't necessarily agree. I mean, content, yes, put content out there. But people, they flock to that, and then they become an expert, right? And he's an expert, has a ton of followers, and then people latch onto that, as opposed to, I think people like you and I who are more thought leaders with original ideas and not just spouting the same thing over and over again. What are your thoughts about the people like that who are out there, with their content?
So I learned from Gary Vee at the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, but then I outgrew Gary Vee. So everything that I'm going to say is going to come from a good place, because foundationally, jab, 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 right hook really helped me build my social media marketing and content game. So I'm someone who loves to audit the success habits of the most successful people in the world. It doesn't mean that I want to become them, but I want to learn the skill sets of the things that they do best. So I love the outliers, the highs and lows of the world, from the Gary V's to the Jesse Itzlers to the Ed Miletts to the David Goggins to the Richard Bransons of the world. They're all over the place. So I'm an amalgamation of all of those different people. But then, like you said, at some point, I got it, where you get the sort of the theme of what they're doing, and I'm looking for more substance or a different take or somebody else. And someone could even give me the exact same content, but just delivered in a different way. So for me, I outgrew Gary. I respect the way that he leads by pumping out this machine, but a lot of people think that the only way to build a brand is to have endless amounts of content. But I can tell you, as someone who runs a content studio, that running a machine like all of that creates its own set of challenges as well as opportunities, because the volume of content, one, you're creating it, but then you're publishing it and you're optimizing all of it, and it's its own business. And a lot of people don't understand that when they go from one person to, do you have anyone on your team helping you with content? Nonetheless, 10 or 20 people that have almost an agency around their brand. So I think that's one of the fallacies that people, or the traps people run into, is they see Gary's content and they're like, I want to be able to create all of that, because if he can do it, I can do it. And it all looks so simple. It actually is, but the faucet is like a Hoover Dam. It's a, and for a lot of people, that's not sustainable. Whereas, hey, let's just focus on doing one thing excellent. So a little of column A, a little of column B for me.
Yeah. And what I think I like what you said, outgrew, because I had never heard of him. And then I tuned into his show, and I thought it was good. But then I quickly saw he was just gathering followers for the people who thought they might get a minute to talk to him on his, tea with Gary V, and hey, follow my father's wine thing, and follow this, and add my text thing. It doesn't feel genuine to me. I think he started in a place that way, but he's moved on. So I think it's important. I say this because I think it's important to just be who you are and not change who you are, depending on if a million people are watching, or if one person's watching, or if nobody's watching, if there's a camera on, or if it's not. So it's like you mic people up at an event, you put them on a camera for a show. Like, what do you think they're going to act and say? 99 out of 100 are gonna do what you think they want to hear, or they're going to act differently than they would if nobody's watching.
So, Matt, I think one of my key differentiators, which is something that in thought leadership, podcasting content, is something that I believe more needs to be done with that not a lot of people do. And it's the word relatability. So I think that what you're saying about Gary Vee's content that's lacking for you is it's missing the relatability. Where oftentimes I like to think about, and certainly when I was building Bacon Sports, someone sees some of my content and they're like, man, I would just love to have a beer with Rob at the bar and chop it up about fantasy sports, sports betting, mindset, coaching, you name it, where there's like, I'm like you. So it's like, yeah, I was a fraternity guy, party bro, ad sales guy who played hard, was very good at his job, didn't love what he was doing, hung out with his friends a ton. I loved sports. It's like, does this sound familiar to a lot of different people? And then decided to completely change my life and be an entrepreneur and really elevate my personal growth and development because I wanted to live the best version of myself. Sound relevant to a lot of other people. And it's like, hey, I'm a coach, not because I'm perfect, because I'm the opposite of perfect, because I've made all of the mistakes in the world and I'm self-aware enough to understand that I've created the actions and the processes for how to overcome these to help other people. So it's very relatable when somebody comes to me with a challenge that they have. I'm like, yep, made that mistake, or yeah, I've got that judgment. It's why we create these processes, Matt, every single day to show up as the best version of myself. I know on the other side of the day, obstacles, challenges, self-limiting beliefs, fears, and the world is going to fire hose all of that at me. So I am the way that I am so that I don't let that get into who I am.
It's hard. Relatable is great. And I think, again, that has to do with being authentic and genuine. It becomes tougher as you become bigger. And so sometimes I think they make the mistake of trying to think that we can relate to someone. Like I'll give you the mental health issue, like Osaka. Like we can't relate to her having, because she could not play. She could take a year off. She could retire. She literally can never play tennis again, and she's going to be just fine. Now we should applaud her for doing it, and we should support her. But I also want to hear about the people who, like myself, which wasn't such a tremendous case of depression, where I've had people on the show who were 5 seconds away from killing themselves. Right. So I think I'm probably more relatable in my mental health struggles than people who were there who were going to kill themselves, or a professional athlete who's struggling. All of these stories need to be shared, but I think it's how are you framing it? Like, let's not frame it in a way just because you think that's the way you should frame it. It should just be shared in the way that it should be shared.
Yeah, and I'm with you. We all have a story about that. I know for myself, I've been challenged with that in my mid-20s. I got out of a relationship and I went through depression, so I know what it is like. So I oftentimes say the reason I am the way that I am now is because I know what it is like to not have this. And I also know what it's like to have this, the gifts and the perspectives that I have in the world. And the thing that we can best do is share our story. And I understand with you that the relatability of somebody who's an Olympic athlete or the best of the best in the world can be challenging. But at the same time, we can relate to their vulnerability and their willingness to say, listen, I have even more eyeballs. So you might not be able to relate to the world being like, what in the world are you doing? But it still is a challenge for me to get up every single day like you do. Granted, my story is a little bit different, but maybe that just leads the conversation for other people in a way where maybe they don't have access to Matt and Rob, but they have access to her. And that gets the conversation going. And then they tune into this and they're like, man, success leaves breadcrumbs. And here's a breadcrumb from her and one from Matt and one from Rob. And it becomes part of the larger narrative.
Yeah. And it's just once you share that story, whatever that story is, it becomes so much easier, and you will. no matter almost any story you share that where you're vulnerable in some way, whether it's on Facebook or on here, someone is going to come up to you or someone's going to send you a message, say two things. I didn't know you were struggling with that. So very sorry to hear. And, or I don't know that, I didn't know that happened to you. And then I, I'm dealing with some of that myself, or my husband, my wife, my daughter, my son, my mom, my father, whatever, my friend, whoever it is. I know someone who's dealing with it, and it's all about starting the conversation, right? Because the same here is about keeping the mental health conversation going, but we have to start we have to start all these conversations, and we have to have these tough conversations, which not a lot of people are willing to have. And I just had this conversation yesterday. My friend, and he's on here, he used to be like, well, why are you so big on this now? I've always been big on all of these things, but I had to answer to other people. I don't have to answer to anyone else right now. And I have a platform, and I think it's my responsibility to speak up and speak loud and start the conversation and keep the conversation moving for the things that I truly believe in. And that's one of the reasons why I have a podcast, is a platform for me to share my ideas and bring on the people who I believe in and the things that I believe in. But hey, I've invited people that I don't agree with at all on the show. I'd love to have those conversations too, be able to have it civilly. Yesterday we had a great episode. Chad Belding, who's a hunter, and obviously a big gun person. I'm not a gun person. I think we disagree on a ton of things, but we're two people who just believe in good and want to do the right thing and want to have the world a better place. And we can have that conversation. And that's one of the great things that a podcast can do, when you can be informational. And then I want to talk about sports, which is sometimes it's like TV. You want mindless TV. You want something to listen to that's going to make you laugh. I listen to the Comedy Channel all day long, and people listen to sports radio all day long.
Yeah, and I think what this is really about is being heard and felt. And I completely understand what you're saying about getting the conversation started. And I didn't know that you're struggling with that. And so often, whether we're talking about high performance and achievement or some of the challenging feelings that we have, there's, speaking of relatability, there's not a lot of people who get where you are because everybody's in their own journey, in their own little space. And it's not easy just to roll up to the bar and be like, oh, hey, Matt, what's going on, man? Man, my mental health is in the dumps right now. Let's talk about that real quick. So it can feel like there's oftentimes not a safe space for that, like a container. And that's what I actually love about coaching. And I'm on the receiving end of a ton of coaching because I like the safe space container to open up and be able to share my challenges and my self-limiting beliefs and my fears in the name of growth. And there's somebody there who's like, hey man, I'm a champion for you. And for me, one of the declarations I speak out loud every single day is I'm a champion for everyone. And this is two ways. Number one, I'm legitimately every person I see for them. I'm a champion in what you're doing. Matt, I'm a champion for you. And take a time machine. I truly want to see you succeed and help other people. At the same time, I'm a champion like a gladiator in an arena. It's like, that is our champion right there. So I'm going to live and lead by example and be the champion for others and root for other people. And part of being a champion is being the example, being vulnerable, and putting yourself out there to help others be heard and felt, because oftentimes you look around and there's nobody else to turn to that gets you or understands the situation. And that's why we create these platforms to help people, because it brings them in and we can connect.
Yeah, I talked about yesterday, asked me why. I said, I go back to one of my favorite movies, A Few Good Men. We fight for the people who can't fight for themselves. We help the people who can't help themselves. Sometimes that's us needing that help, and we need to ask for it. And so there should never be any shame in asking for help. And that could be anything. It's not even just mental health. It's over a lot of things.
Yeah, and Matt, I actually love to use that as a formula for the content that I create. So I am comfortable in who I am as a creator and my ability to have an idea, even if it's I'm running through this challenge right now, and immediately turn that into action. So I think of the times in which I've been most vulnerable on creating content. And those are oftentimes the best performing episodes because you're like, oh man, I feel so nervous to share this thing. And I think about the most nervous I ever was on a single piece of content. And it was years ago when I have this goal that at the time I wanted to help 1,000,000 people. I'd always said I help a lot of people, but I'd never quantified it. And I was like, I'm going to quantify this. I'm going to help 1,000,000 people. And I was legitimately nervous and scared inside. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to quantify it. I don't know anybody else who's doing this. And I've never even seen anybody say a number like this. So what did I do? I turned on my light, turned on my microphone, and jumped on LinkedIn Live. And I was like, all right, everybody, I'm nervous to say what I'm about to say. I have no idea how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to help 1,000,000 people. And I'm putting this out here right now. And this is my social proof. And I'm doing this to hold myself accountable. And there's a quote that I love from Steve Harvey. The dream has to be bigger than the fear. And when I think about vulnerability, my dream of helping 1,000,000 people, boom, I've got to be able to get through the fear of, I feel really scared inside on how I'm going to put a big ass thing out there. And what are people going to think or respond or anything like that? So I did that. And once I got positive response from that, I'm like, you know what? Anytime I'm feeling something, I'm going to share it with others because this is where the true growth and the value is for others. Everybody else is going to live surface level, all the shiny objects, the way the media and the world is just going to throw stuff at us. But here's Rob and Matt, who's willing to say, you know what, guys, I'm going through a tough time. And here, Matt, is the formula for this. And this is super key. And anyone who's listening right now, congratulations. You're about to get a nugget of gold. So to make sure that this isn't woe is me, because that's the challenge, right, Matt? Hey, I'm going through this thing. It can just become a pity party. And we see plenty of posts like that. Oh, I'm going through this tough time in the dumps. So I like to say, step one, what is the vulnerable challenge or obstacle or thing that you're facing? Step two, what is the thing that you did about it? The action item that says, I was feeling this, I transform myself and I'm doing this to overcome it. And then step three, here's what you can do. So now you're leading by example. I'm opening up and I'm vulnerable. Number two, I did something about this vulnerability, so it's not a woe is me. And then step three, now that I've done it, you can do the same.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how many resources are out there, and the resources that you wouldn't even think are resources that can be cathartic, right? I think that's the right word, cathartic in what you're dealing with. I want to talk sports a little bit. That's where you guys started. Why sports? What were the sports that got you into what you were doing, and why did you think you were? And then tell me the three biggest sports stories in the world as we sit here today.
So for me, my origin story is simple. I grew up in Pittsburgh, a diehard Steelers, Penguins, at the time Pirates fan, not as much anymore. And I was exposed to championships early. Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr won the Stanley Cup, and then my mom's side of the family is from Chicago, so I was a Bulls fan. So I grew up loving Michael Jordan, of course, being a kid of the 80s as well. So I'm sitting there and playing basketball in my backyard with my tongue hanging out, pretending to be Michael Jordan. So they win 6 championships. The Penguins win 2 championships. And in Pittsburgh, they only raise you one way, and that's as a diehard sports fan. So I played sports just as like a rec guy. I loved it, and I loved to watch it. And my dream my entire life was to work in sports. And that is not the way that my life unfolded. When I graduated college, I was unemployed for a year and a half. I was dead broke living off my credit card. I then spent the next 10 years doing inside sales, making money, doing jobs I didn't love. So I sat there in the exact moment Matt was, and I'd mentioned this. I said, I would regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't give it a chance at making my dreams happen. And I looked at the sports content landscape, the media publishers, and this is 12 years ago. And I said to myself, I am as good or better than all of the content that I see being produced. And why is that? Because the formula, and it still is, was aggregation for sports blogs. Copy, paste, insert what is on at the time, Bleacher, Barstool, Deadspin, ESPN. Boom, we're going to take what they have, we're going to attribute with the link, and now we're just going to aggregate across the board. And that's what the sports media landscape looked like. And I was like, that's unoriginal. Anybody can do it, and it doesn't relate to me because I'm a sports fan, and I know what good content is. So for me, I'd written for sports blogs for free for more than a decade, just because if they say you can do whatever you want, I'm like, I want to talk about sports.
Yeah.
And that's what I did until I said, I have to know if I belong. And that's when I went all in and started Bacon Sports. So that's my why.
Well, what was Bacon Sports known for? Which was there a specific sport?
So the niche was sports comedy. So when I looked at the landscape, I was like, all right, what can I do different than everybody else? And living in Chicago at the time, it just so happens that I lived across the street from Second City, the greatest comedy training center in the world, that has trained the likes of Bill Murray and Chris Farley and Tina Fey and Steve Carell. And I'm like, this thing here that spits out the best comedians ever. I went there for 4 years and studied improv and comedy writing, not to become a comedian, but to learn the skill set of a comedian, to apply it to the content and the marketing that I created. So all of a sudden, formulaically, I say, all right, we at Bacon Sports are creating, number one, original content. Number two, we are doing it with a lens of sports comedy and nostalgia. So we are going to entertain you and we are going to drop knowledge. And the knowledge part was a piece of cake because we as sports fans, from an authenticity and relatability standpoint, I can tell you everything from Michael Jordan to WWF wrestlers to everything.
Way too much. Our wives and everyone will tell you we have way too much sports knowledge that is just irrelevant in the world.
Right. So let's take that and let's build a community of it to where people are like, man, I would love to be able to have a beer with Bacon Sports at the bar. So we covered everything that it was relevant to what I call the lifestyle of sports. And that's how Bacon Sports started, and that evolved into the sports content studio it is today when we moved away from the publisher model and more to almost like a creative agency that helps brands market to sports fans, because who better to help a brand market to a sports fan than the exact demographic that they're looking to market to?
Yeah. You've mentioned beer twice. What beer are you drinking? What's your favorite?
So favorite beer will be location based. So I live in Sarasota.
Obviously, there's a lot of good breweries out there.
So I live in Sarasota, Florida now, and recently. So my favorite beer is Yuengling. Growing up in Pittsburgh, Yuengling was all over the place. But right now I'm in Chicago. And if I was able to go maybe 100 miles north to Wisconsin, I would be drinking myself some Spotted Cow beer. When I'm in Chicago here, all right, you're going to get some 312 as the local beer, some Goose Island stuff. But it's also summer. So you're looking at some blonde ales or some summer ales or a wide variety of things. So that's what I love about certainly being in Chicago is the number of breweries or microbreweries for me that get the opportunity to try a variety of things.
I'm a sour guy. There's a place called Tripping Animals in Miami that my friend and I, it's my favorite brewery. There's sours there, or if you like sours, they're outrageously good. Give me the top three sports stories for you today.
So it's interesting because yesterday was the worst / slowest sports day of the entire year because it's the only day in which there are no major professional sports happening.
I posted that. It's actually Monday too, the day before and after the All-Star game.
Right. So times be tough right now in the sports content landscape. But I think if you're going to look at what's actually on my mind right now, I'm still all about the NBA offseason. So these moves. So I think you're going to be looking at something on where's Kevin Durant going? What's going to happen with the Kyrie Irving situation and the dominoes that unfold from there? Because it's like, all right, well, does Kyrie somehow get his way to the Lakers? If he's getting his way to the Lakers, what's happening with Russ? So then what would Kyrie, LeBron, and AD look like? But then there's also where does Kevin Durant go? Because wherever that domino goes, then the rest of the dominoes fall. So
I think that's the only NBA story is Durant. Kyrie, instead of Russ, is a downgrade.
Whoa, Kyrie is so unstable. I actually have no interest in any Kyrie story because he's no longer that guy for me. Yeah. But Kevin Durant does move that needle. I love, of course, the infusion of, all right, you're seeing NBA draft with Paolo and Chet and Jabari and where that's going to come. So I'm a big fan of basketball culture. So that for me would be number one. Number two, NFL training camps opened up this week. So for me, this is the start of fantasy football prep season, sports betting, futures, and props. And this is the one time of year as football fans in which things are the best because we're all 0-0. That maybe our quarterback becomes Patrick Mahomes. So I'm a Steelers fan. So it's like they drafted Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky's our quarterback right now. But what if he became Patrick Mahomes? So optimism is top there. And then number 3, the biggest sports story, I think has to be the Brittany Griner story. And I was watching the ESPYs last night, and one of the things that they said numerous times is the more times we can say Brittany Griner, the more times we will get attention on what is going on for her.
But I found it interesting that they said BG a lot.
Well, right. So they were doing that, and I think this is a great opportunity to live what they said. Hey, the more we can say Brittany Griner. So it is true. It is the number 3 sports story in the world right now because it is polarizing and it is more than just sports. This is now global politics.
Yeah, it's
all because she decided to bring some vape cartridges in Russia, and is what it is. But it's another opportunity for us to be like, hey, let's get her back.
But I find it interesting to say more times we say her name, and then they didn't say her name.
Right, BG, right? Because there's always the mom test. So if you say, hey, mom, do you know who Tom Brady is? Yes. Do you know who LeBron James is? Yes. Do you know who BG is? No.
Yeah.
So that's where we got to get to the mom test where it's like, do you know who Brittany Griner is? Yeah, I think I saw something. Who is that person again? That's really what they're hoping to get to on the say the name more times.
I'll go backwards. 3 for me is Brittany Griner. I read an interesting thing that the Russia people are mad at the U.S. for saying it's unwanted or an unnecessary. I mean, they have a law against it. The law is the law. I'd be a real big hypocrite. I say the law is the law. It's not that hard to follow it. Now, what should that punishment be? That's become a Russia-U.S. political thing. So that's where it's like, I got an interesting story for you. They want to trade Brittany Griner for Victor Boot. Victor Boot, his nickname is man, I just forgot his nickname.
It's something bananas
or something assassin.
Right.
Yeah, when I worked for anti-money laundering solutions and we would do demos, the profile that I would show was Victor Boot. The worst profile of the human being in the world that you want to make sure you don't do business with or have any relationship with is Victor Boot. And that's who they want to trade Brittany Griner with. So it's crazy on that. My number 2 story is Durant. I think it's the only NBA story right now that people should care about. And the number 1 story for me, I think, is this Live. I don't think the PGA should care because there's not good enough players, and they shouldn't care because they're just giving money. I don't know what they're accomplishing. The good players aren't going to go to Live because if they want to win and not worry just about money. And I don't blame anyone for worrying just about money. The star note is this Scott Boras trying to throw the Nationals under the bus for not flying Soto private. Like, you got enough money, buddy. Get him a private flight if you felt that bad about it.
Right. So the thing about Live for me that has my interest is finally there's somebody on the PGA Tour's block also slinging some stuff. So this actually, to me, has nothing to do with Live as much as it does a number 2 in the market, because now the PGA Tour is forced to innovate. Now they are forced to think about fan engagement and how do I do things differently. So what I hear from them is very much the taxi medallion in New York and Chicago when Uber and Lyft first came out, where they're like, how dare they come on our turf? We paid $100,000 for these taxi medallions. And Uber and Lyft come in and they're like, we're going to make it much easier for people to book taxis.
But there's room for both of them. The bottom line is there's room for both of them. Brent says the story is conference realignments in NML. I'm talking about today. I think a week or so ago it was, and I think it's going to be next month. I think it's taking a back seat right now.
And I would agree with the conference realignment. I believe where that's going is and it's already there, but it's going to be the dominoes of super conferences. You're going to have the Big Ten, you're going to have the SEC, and once the Clemson domino falls, I think it's going to be Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, and then we're just going to have these super conferences. And I'm all for all of this because I just want the best product possible. So whether it's live, whether it's conference realignment,
I don't think it gets the best product. If I'm the SEC, I stand put and say, we're good. We don't need anybody else. You figure it out. There's never going to be equal amounts. There's never going to be, we're not all playing each other, right? Equal balanced schedules. Anytime you get more than,
right.
14 or whatever. So it should be 12, like get 12 teams or 13. Even then you'd have a bye. Like if they're not playing each other, there's no real way. And then, so you're going to have that expanded playoff. I think those are top stories. I just think that it's sort of taken a break, right? There's no movement a week ago or 2 weeks ago when they first did.
I'm with you.
It's going to heat up soon. You got the conference meetings and coaches. Who cares what any of these coaches say? They're all just saying what's best for their program, which they should do. And they're all talking PC anyway, right? I mean, even people like Lane Kiffin aren't really speaking their mind that much, relatively speaking.
Right. A month ago, we would have been talking about Nick Saban and Texas A&M, but we've moved on past that.
Yeah, we've moved on from that. What's your favorite sports movies? You have let's say top 3 or 5 favorite sports movies?
Oh my God. So sports movies, there's, I think you have to almost do it by genre. So without me even getting into that. So if you're looking in the golf side of things, so one, I'm a huge fan of Billy Madison. So I love that. Two, I've also got to go, if we're talking baseball, you're at Sandlot, you're looking at Major League. If we are talking about football side of things, so you've got Friday Night Lights, you've got Necessary Roughness, you've got Rudy. And I'm sure there's more others that I'm not thinking about.
Remember the Titans.
Oh, of course. What else?
Slapshot for hockey, Slapshot and Mighty Ducks. And what was the one with Rob Lowe? Youngblood?
Oh, and of course, Mighty Ducks has got to be in there. So I'm very much a throwback in the nostalgia one. I don't know if Top Gun fits in as a sports movie. They have some minor sports vignettes, and it's very aggro, high performance. So maybe not constituting a sports movie. And of course, then you're looking at, all the Rocky movies. I mean, for me, Rocky 4 is the number one Rocky movie for me. So that's going in there. I'm trying to think what else would be constituted. So my favorite sports scene in a movie is in Swingers when they're playing NHL 95 and we make Wayne Gretzky's head bleed for superfan number 99 over here.
Sweet. Well, so you didn't mention 2 of my favorite movies of all time, not even just in the sports genre, was Field of Dreams and Hoosiers. Those are 2 of my top 5 movies of all time. I got to go to the Field of Dreams game, which was made for TV event. It was cool to be there. It was a very made for TV event. It's not easy to get to, but it'd be cool to get to go there.
Yeah, and I have to add on there, Hoosiers obviously reminded me of Blue Chips. Because who doesn't want to see Shaq, Penny, and Matt Nover? And go ahead.
I'm writing the Nick Nolte scene where he quits is one of the best sports movie scenes. I mean, around. There's a scene in Rocky 5 where he's talking to his son, which is one of the greatest sports scenes in movies too. Sports movies are so great for so many different reasons. They'll make you laugh, they'll make you cry, they'll get you all pumped up about it. I think there hasn't been the Hoosier the one that Sandler just did was pretty good.
Yeah, The Hustle, I really enjoyed that. It was very specific to people who love NBA and sports culture. You knew the cameos of the people. I actually really enjoyed just sort of the narrative of a scout because it's one of the angles we don't see very often.
Yeah, there was a few scout movies that were pretty funny. Kevin Bacon had one where he was playing The Air Up There. It was a good basketball. Yeah. So many good basketball movies that people don't talk about. It's great. We're going to get you out of the Wolff Den with the same question we let everybody go with. You can pick anyone in the world to spend a day with 24 hours. You can do whatever you guys want to do. They have to be alive, and you can't be related to them. Who would you pick, and what would you guys do?
Oh, that's a good thing. So I think for me, my criteria is going to be it's going to be very
Brent,
experiential.
it's only for the guests. He puts this every time. So come on the show. We'll talk about we'll talk about NIL and realignment, and then you'll be able to give fishing with George W. at the end.
Actually, I know the answer would be for me, it would be Ed Milet, and I would want to have a day of anything from golfing because I know Ed loves to golf. So do I. And Ed is a wealth of information. So I would want to talk to him about him speaking on stage because if you've never seen Ed Milet speak on stage, to me he is the number one speaker in the world. He's got a new book, The Power of One, which is really good, and I would want to soak up his business knowledge, his life knowledge, his relationship knowledge. Ed has been a mentor of mine on the digital side for years, but getting to meet him in person and take it to the next level, that's who I'm choosing.
It's the book is The Power of One More, not The Power of One. The Power of One More. But Ed Milet,
Right.
great choice. We've had people in that vein. Does he have a TED Talk?
I don't know if it's a TED Talk. Actually, I've never seen a TED Talk from him,
Yeah.
even though I actually just saw him speak in Dallas about a month ago, and it was incredible.
The two best speakers I've seen live, John O'Leary, who we've had on the show, and Frank Abagnale of Catch Me If You Can, who we've tried to get on the show, but he doesn't do media anymore. But great choice with Ed. If we get enough money and influence and the Wolff Den blows up the way it should, who knows? We might be having that meeting with Ed. Check
So
out. Oh, go ahead.
I've got two quick speakers to add to that list. So also on the top list, Jesse Itzler. If you've never seen Jesse Itzler speak, out of this world amazing. He is completely different. And then number two, last night at the ESPYs, Dickie V's speech. It's an absolute must watch. It is the 1B to Jimmy V's 1A. It is just, you watch Dickie V and it is incredible, baby.
I thought Stuart Scott's was better than Dickie V's. I liked what Dickie V said. The speech overall, I think, as far as motivating and the story, his story is great. Jimmy V, that speech is the best I've ever heard, and I'm not even sure anyone's ever going to beat it.
Right. So I just wanted to add that in for anybody who didn't experience it. I'm not ranking them, but
No,
it
I
was
get
very
it.
good.
It was a great speech, and I love Dickie V. Even if you don't like his content, the passion that he has, I think everyone should have that type of passion in their life. If you want a free guide to how to create a morning routine, check out the website robcressy.com. Bacon Sports. If you're committed to doing a podcast, or you're interested in doing a podcast and can be converted to and committed to do a podcast, check out robcressy.com. Great to have you on here. Always great to talk podcasting and sports, and looking forward to seeing what's next. We have some episodes next week, so tune in. We're going to keep going as long as people want to keep on joining the Wolff Den and talking. So have a great night, everyone. Great weekend. Do something fun and do something good.